Surprisingly enough, the wardens didn't always just do this out of the kindness of their hearts for the human beings who got killed, or some moral responsibility. Wardens actually got paid to do their job. Whenever any individual monster, or someone from the monstrous races as they call it, such as werewolves, vampires, demons, and a myriad of other things, violated the rules and got put on the hit list, then they would get what amounted to a bounty, depending on the severity of their actions. There are, of course, levels of punishment under the most severe act of killing human beings. You are able to make violations in other ways, such as performing actions that take advantage of human beings' lack of magical knowledge, manipulating human beings through magic or supernatural ability in ways that lead to their eventual lack of well-being, pain, suffering, or detrimental effects to their lives. For example, vampires are actually able to sort of hypnotize people. It's known as entrancement. And while a vampire has a human entranced, they can basically make them do anything. They're sort of like a puppet. If a vampire decides to use entrancement on a human being and tells them to go to a bank, withdraw everything that they own, and hand it over, they're going to, of course, do it. But here's the kicker. That's found as a violation of their protocols, the way that humans and monsters are meant to interact in the world. Apparently, if vampires use entrancement in order to get a human being to allow them to drink a certain amount of blood and not remember the whole affair, that is apparently entirely fine. They'll just overlook it, so long as the human being lived and there was no long-term detrimental effects. It's completely ignorable. But if you entrance one and force them to give you everything they own, then suddenly this causes long-term detrimental effects to that human being's life. Essentially, it's no different from using vampire powers to be a simple bank robber, or something of that nature. And so, you'll receive a bounty based not on taking human lives, but on negatively affecting them, meaning that the wardens will put a hit out for your capture rather than your death. And you'll see justice, or at least the warden's opinion of justice, based on your actions. They'll capture you and negotiate with the ruling faction of your specific monster race as to how to deal with you. They actually have a freaking interracial court system. It's insane. Basically, it's a jury containing monsters and human beings, primarily wardens, from all over. Basically, there are more than 100 seats on the jury, each containing humans and different sorts of monsters, balanced out so everyone gets a fair opinion on it, based on the law that they broke, the ordinance that they were found in violation in. There are multiple punishments they could be subjected to. Basically, most laws have a variation of 10 different punishments. This is so the council, or jury, has 10 options. Once they're caught and brought into court, the selection of 100 members will each cast their vote as to which of the punishments they believe that this offender should receive. And the punishment with the most votes is declared the official ruling and the punishment that that individual should receive. And it's also important to note that on a more positive turn, it actually goes the same way in the other direction. Human beings are just as susceptible to being pulled into this program as monsters. For example, If some human being decides that werewolves or vampires are a monstrosity, regardless of their behavior, and decides to lash out at them, killing monsters at random, then they can be, well, put out on a hit list, just the same as a monster who started killing human beings. And at that point, there are essentially bounty hunters within the monster world who focus on human beings who violate the ordinance, getting paid a somewhat fair amount in order to bring them in depending on their actions. And they face the same justice system, a council containing 100 members given a choice of about 10 different punishments based on the severity of their actions, which one of will become the final ruling on how to deal with them. To be honest, the entire legal system for interacting between races was definitely a trip. I never thought that they would have such complex systems for things like that. But I suppose after hearing that there are interactions between them, it only stands to reason that eventually they would create some sort of legal system to oversee those interactions. It's basic logic. Sound reasoning, I suppose you could call it. Why would I think that monsters would be any less prevalent to it than human beings? I suppose that's just my ignorance of what being a monster really means. Just because you become a werewolf or a vampire doesn't mean you get to live in some sort of lawless state, doing whatever you want whenever you want to do it. There are always going to be laws and society, no matter where you choose to go or what you happen to be. To be honest, after about a week, I had become quite the expert on their culture, laws, and ordinance, and had gotten most of it down packed. My training with Renee's father was coming along very well, and just as before, he told me that he approved of the strides that I was making, the pace I was taking at getting competent within his fighting style. So, after about a week of this heavy-duty training and learning process, Renee's father suggested that I take a few days off in order to recover. The weekend had just arrived, so it couldn't come at a better time. And finally, me, Renee, and my friends could hang out and have some fun, relax a little bit, as the last week had been filled with a great measure of tension. Me, Steve, Lisa, and Renee had actually been hanging out all weekend. We had reached Sunday, so it was the last day before we'd have to get back to school and back to work. We had seen a few movies, hung out at some pizza places, and were actually planning another ride to go to a concert in a nearby town or city. There were several to choose from. Mainly, we were having a problem picking between major venues where the more popular bands and musicians would be playing, and trying to find a smaller venue where lesser-known bands might be playing. Try to catch some stars before they hit it big. Steve was primarily for going to see the lesser-known bands, while Lisa had some major concerts that she was dying to go to. Renee was surprisingly siding with Steve, while I was more with Lisa. I was looking forward to a specific concert that was passing through, primarily Vicky Voice. Apparently, she was on the rebound and had just come out with a brand new album. And while Vicky Voice was primarily known as a pop singer, apparently she had taken a dramatic shift after some troubling incidents in New Star City, where she comes from. Apparently, after some attempted kidnapping, in which her life was saved by some guy, a superhero that just sort of showed up in New Star City, going by the name of Heavy Metal Knight. I saw the videos online. The guy could do some cool shit. I even saw the videos of the attempted kidnapping in which he saved her. Apparently, sometime after that, she started taking up rock, even signing on to her record label, a new member to her group, some guy named Kevin, who basically came from nowhere, just some guy out of New Star City, who had some serious chops on a guitar, and surprisingly sung very well. I could tell that the guy was a total metalhead. And that's not just a figure of speech. The guy had so many piercings it was crazy. And his entire look screamed metal. Nothing but rock and roll. So apparently she signed this dude and they started making collaboration albums. And they were just making a tour for their album release, which I had actually listened to, and it was awesome. Pop was never my thing, but their fusion between a typical pop and some heavy metal was actually very impressive. Like, honestly, I couldn't get the beats out of my head, or the lyrics. Catchy barely did it justice, and they were taking the country by storm. And they had a concert passing through Black Rock Falls in the next week or two. So I was looking forward to it.